No one notices at first. You sit in a room full of people and you are smiling, nodding, laughing at exactly the right moments. Everything about you looks fine, comfortable even. But somewhere beneath that stillness, something ancient and carefully constructed is holding everything together. You never complain. You never break down in front of others. You never say, "I'm struggling" out loud because saying it would make it real. Think for a moment about the last time someone asked how you were doing. You probably said, "I'm fine," before they even finished the question. Not because you were lying, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that your feelings were a burden no one truly wanted to carry. You learned that the room got quieter when you expressed pain, that people shifted uncomfortably when you cried, that your sadness made others feel helpless so they pulled away. And your young, brilliant mind watched all of this. It cataloged every reaction, every silence, every subtle withdrawal from the people you needed most. Without realizing it, your mind made a decision. Not a conscious one. Not one you chose with logic or language. It was deeper than that, quieter than that. Your nervous system decided that emotions were dangerous. That vulnerability was a doorway that only let pain in. That staying sealed, staying composed, staying unreachable was the only truly safe way to exist. This was not weakness. This was intelligence in its rawest, most primal form. Your psyche was solving a problem that no child should ever have to solve. You began to master the art of disappearing emotionally while remaining physically present. You were there, but the real you was locked somewhere no one could reach. You became quieter, more aware, more careful. You developed a kind of emotional fluency in other people's feelings while remaining illiterate about your own. You learned to read a room before you entered it. You learned to adjust your energy to match whatever was needed so that no one would look too closely at you. You learned to ask, "Are you okay?" more than you ever said, "I'm not." You became the one people leaned on because being leaned on meant no one ever thought to ask if you needed support too. You became the strong one, the steady one, the one with the calm voice in a crisis. And you wore that identity like armor because it was armor. Every time you swallowed a feeling, you told yourself it wasn't that serious. Every time grief rose in your chest, you found something productive to do with your hands. You cleaned, you worked, you planned, you helped others. Anything to keep moving. Because the moment you stopped moving, the feelings were right there, waiting. You became incredibly self-sufficient. Not because independence came naturally, but because depending on others had once cost you something you were never fully reimbursed for. The world watched all of this and called it maturity. The world saw your composure and named it strength. And you accepted those labels because they were better than the alternative. People said things like, "You're so mature for your age." They said it with admiration, with relief, with a kind of grateful wonder that made you stand taller. "You're so strong. You never let things get to you. I wish I could handle things the way you do." And you nodded, and you smiled, and you quietly died a little inside. Because strength was the story everyone needed you to perform. And you were so good at performing it that even you started to believe the performance was the person. But no one asked what it cost you. No one asked what you had to shut down inside yourself to maintain that stillness. No one thought to look behind the composure. No one asked when you last cried without immediately feeling ashamed of it. No one asked if you even remembered what it felt like to let someone fully in. The praise kept coming and the real you kept shrinking. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just slowly, quietly, the way a photograph fades when left too long in the light. You became so skilled at appearing okay that the people closest to you genuinely believed you were. And that loneliness, the loneliness of being unseen by the people who think they see you, is one of the heaviest things a person can carry. Psychologists call this emotional suppression. It is the habitual, often unconscious practice of inhibiting emotional expression before it reaches the surface of behavior. But more specifically, what many of these people develop is something researchers call alexithymia. It is a condition where a person has profound difficulty identifying, describing, and processing their own emotional states. This is not coldness. This is not indifference. This is a nervous system that was trained, under conditions of emotional unsafety, to treat feelings as threats rather than information. The brain is a survival organ before it is anything else. And when a child's emotional expressions are met with punishment, withdrawal, dismissal, or suffocating anxiety, the brain learns to intercept those feelings before they become visible. The amygdala, which processes emotional signals, begins routing those signals differently. Instead of moving toward expression and release, they are redirected toward suppression and control. Over time, this rewiring becomes structural. The pathways between feeling and expression grow narrow, overgrown, difficult to access. It is not that the emotions stop existing. It is that they are rerouted underground. And underground emotions do not disappear. They accumulate. They calcify. They express themselves not as feelings but as tension in the jaw, tightness in the chest, a low-grade exhaustion that no amount of sleep ever fully resolves. The body keeps the score, as trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk so precisely named it. What the mind refuses to feel, the body insists on holding. And it holds it faithfully for years, for decades, until something finally cracks. The belief system forms quietly alongside all of this. You begin to operate from invisible rules. Rules like, needing things is embarrassing. Asking for help is weakness. Being emotional means losing control. These rules feel like wisdom because they once functioned as protection. They kept you safe in environments where your emotional needs were too large, too inconvenient, or simply too much for the people around you. But a rule built for survival in one environment does not automatically dissolve when that environment changes. You carry it forward, into friendships, into love, into the private rooms of your own mind. You bring those rules into every relationship without announcing them. And they operate silently, shaping how close you allow people to get, how much you reveal, how quickly you withdraw when someone gets too near the real thing. The walls you built to survive childhood become the walls that keep connection out in adulthood. And you wonder, sometimes, why intimacy feels so terrifying even when you want it so deeply. You might find yourself unable to cry even when you desperately need to. The tears will rise and then something inside you will clamp down, hard and automatic, before they ever fall. You might notice that you intellectualize everything. That when someone asks how you feel, you instinctively explain the situation instead of naming the emotion living inside it. You might change the subject the moment a conversation moves too close to something real. Not because you are rude. Because proximity to your own pain still feels like standing too close to a fire. You might be the person everyone calls in a crisis, and yet you cannot think of a single person you would call if your world fell apart at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. You might feel more comfortable expressing love through actions than words. Through showing up, through doing, through fixing, because doing feels safe and saying feels like standing naked in a room full of strangers. You might feel a strange, unsettling emptiness after moments that should feel joyful. A wedding, a celebration, a success, and you are there, smiling but hovering just outside the feeling, watching yourself from a careful distance. You might feel deeply uncomfortable when someone cries in front of you. Not because you do not care, but because their open emotion is a mirror, and you are not yet ready to look into it. You might sabotage relationships the moment they begin to feel too real, too close, too honest. And then you tell yourself you prefer solitude because solitude is a choice and abandonment is not. You might have a persistent, nameless anxiety that you cannot trace to any single cause. Because when emotions are not processed, they do not evaporate. They convert into restlessness, into overthinking, into a body that never fully relaxes. Here is the painful truth. The thing that no one who loves you has ever been brave enough to say directly. What once protected you is now imprisoning you. The silence that saved you as a child is suffocating you as an adult. The walls that kept the pain out are also keeping the love out. The self-sufficiency that made you remarkable is making you unreachable. You are not broken, but you are living inside a system that was designed for an emergency that ended years ago. And your nervous system never received the notification that the emergency was over. You are still guarding a wound that needed tending long before you were old enough to tend it yourself. You are still bracing for an impact that already happened in a room you no longer live in. And the cruelest part is that you became so good at not needing anything that the people in your life stopped offering. They saw your walls and called them preferences. They saw your distance and called it independence. So here you are, capable of holding everyone else together, quietly unable to fall apart in front of a single person, longing for depth and connection while flinching every time it arrives. Think now about the child you were before all of this calcified, before the suppression became a system, before the performance became a personality. That child had needs. Real, legitimate human needs. The need to be heard without being fixed. The need to feel without being rushed back to composure. The need to fall apart and be held while falling. Somewhere inside you, that child is still asking the questions they never got to finish asking. Why didn't anyone notice I was hurting? Why did my feelings make people so uncomfortable? Why did I have to become small so that others could feel okay? Why did being emotional feel like something I needed to apologize for? Why did I learn to comfort everyone else before I ever learned to comfort myself? These are not self-pitying questions. They are sacred ones. They are the questions that, if you let yourself sit with them long enough, begin to illuminate everything. Every pattern, every wall, every relationship that almost made it all the way to real. That child deserved someone who could hold the weight of their feelings without flinching. They deserved a witness, not a fixer. Not someone who changed the subject or told them to look on the bright side. They deserved someone who could simply sit beside them in the dark and say, "I see you. You don't have to be okay right now. I'm not going anywhere." Healing does not start with fixing the parts of you that are broken. It starts with finally acknowledging that those parts were never broken to begin with. Healing begins the moment you stop pathologizing your own survival. The moment you look at every wall, every silence, every emotional exit you ever took and say, "That made sense. Given what I was working with, that made complete sense." You did not develop emotional suppression because something was wrong with you. You developed it because something was wrong with your environment and you were too young, too small, and too dependent to change the environment, so you changed yourself instead. That is not weakness. That is one of the most sophisticated things a human nervous system can do. You adapted to survive conditions that no child should have been asked to survive alone. The shame you carry about your emotional unavailability is misplaced. You are not cold. You are not incapable of love. You are not fundamentally damaged in some way that puts real connection permanently out of reach. You are a person who learned, under very specific and very real conditions, that emotions were unsafe. And you honored that lesson faithfully. You protected yourself with everything you had. But here is what no one tells you about survival strategies. They carry an expiration date. And the grief of healing is not grief about who you are. It is grief about who you had to become to make it through. Remove the shame from your story. Not by pretending the past did not shape you, but by finally understanding that you were always responding intelligently to the information you were given. You were never too much. Your feelings were never the problem. What was too much was the expectation that a child should manage their emotional world entirely alone, quietly, without inconveniencing anyone. So begin now, not with grand transformation, but with a single honest question. Sit with it. Let it move through you without rushing toward an answer. What did I need that I never received? Not in the abstract. Specifically. Concretely. In the rooms and moments and relationships that shaped the architecture of who you became. What did you need in that specific silence, in that specific dismissal, in that specific moment when you swallowed the feeling and smiled instead? Name it, even just to yourself, especially just to yourself, because naming what was missing is not wallowing. It is cartography. You are finally mapping the terrain of your own interior so that you can stop being lost inside it. Carl Jung wrote that what you resist persists, and what you make conscious you can begin to transform. He believed that the unlived emotional life does not disappear into silence. It descends into the body and into the shadow, and it shapes everything from below. Jung called this the shadow self, the repository of everything we were taught to hide, deny, or perform our way around. And he argued with profound wisdom that integration, not elimination, was the path toward wholeness. You do not heal by destroying the parts of you that learn to go quiet. You heal by finally turning toward them. By extending to your own inner life the same patient, non-judgmental presence you have spent years offering to everyone else. The voice inside you that learned to stay silent deserves to finally be heard. Not by someone else first. By you. That is where it begins. That is always where it begins. You did not have a choice then. The environment was decided for you. The emotional rules were written before you were old enough to question them. The walls went up before you had any say in the architecture. But now you do have a choice. Not an easy one. Not a clean or linear or painless one. But a real one. You can choose one small moment at a time to let the feeling surface without immediately shutting it down. You can choose to stay in the uncomfortable conversation instead of changing the subject. You can choose to say, "I'm struggling," to one person, even if your voice shakes when you say it. You can choose to let someone see you, really see you, not the composed version, not the strong one, not the one who always knows what to say, but the one underneath all of that who is still learning how to need things without apology. This is not a dramatic transformation. It is a quiet revolution. It happens in private moments, in small surrenders, in the decision to stop performing okayness for an audience that never asked for the show. You never had someone who could hold your feelings without flinching. But you still have time to become that person for yourself. And slowly, carefully, to let others learn how to be that person for you too. You never had a voice that was welcomed when it spoke about pain. But you still have that voice. It has been waiting, patient and faithful, for the moment you were finally ready to let it speak. You never had the childhood where your emotional world was treated as something sacred. But you still have today. And today is where all real healing has ever lived.